Here we go. So today I wanted to talk about the duality between the idea of force and the idea of flow. So often I really think about life in terms of water. If we think about it, we're mostly water. The world is mostly water. Did you know also that no water can be destroyed or created? Like all the water that's here on Earth came from space at like one point in time and has always been here. So like the same water that we're drinking today was around when the dinosaurs were here. Like it can change forms and it can, turn into clouds or turn into vapor or go in us or go out of us, but like it's always the same water and it always has been since the creation of our planet. And I've always thought that's really interesting. They say that water holds memories. There's this guy, Dr. Emoto, who did all these tests. I'm pretty sure that's his name. I'll fact check that. But he did these tests where he like spoke things to water and then froze it and then took pictures of the resulting crystallization. And he did it thousands and thousands and thousands of times over so that there was no way to say that's a coincidence. And time again, water that he had said things like, I love you or thank you or things like that had these beautiful geometric patterns when they froze. In water that he said, you're terrible, I hate you, you're the worst, had these distorted, ununiform designs. Time and time again. So I think that's really interesting to understand that water is something that's a part of all of us and this planet, and it connects all of us, and that it's maybe more interesting than we've given it credit for, which is so fascinating that I didn't bring my water in today. I realized that as I stepped up here, but gosh, what an important part of our whole system. Like without it, I don't think any of us would exist. Like we wouldn't be able to. There wouldn't be life on the planet without oxygen and water. So there was another one that these people were doing time and time again, have tested. Meditators will get together in like Tibet or India, and they'll do these meditations to clean a body of water. Say there's a really polluted pond, and they will put their intention on it and just meditate for weeks at a time. And then they'll go scientifically test that water, and the water has listened and it has purified itself and it's clean. It's weird because it's like, it's science, but it's still on a realm where people go, well, that's not right. But they've been able to prove it. I mean, it's a thing, it's happening. It's that not only can water listen and remember and can pick up our intentions and our thought vibrations, but also that, I don't know, that we don't.
Water, it will remember.
Yeah, it will. It'll remember you. Isn't that really sweet? It'll take a part of you with it and share it with the rest of the world. I think it's a really beautiful thing. So intrinsically, we are creatures of this sort of movement in the same way that like when the full moon comes, they say, oh, the crazies come out. My mom worked at a mental institution. It really was true that things got a lot crazier during that time, because literally if the moon is pulling the oceans and it's pulling the water, why would it not pull the water within you? If you are 75 or more % water, well, of course that would affect you and that would pull you and that might leave you feeling a little weird, Literally the term lunatic comes from Luna, the moon. So I always thought that was really fascinating. If we understood that better, maybe we could have a more harmonious setup with the cycles of the world. And so really this all comes back to the cyclical nature of humanity and the world, that there's cycles in place, and if we're aware of them and intentional, what a better existence we can have as individuals. You each have your own flow. You have this ebb and flow that's moving within you. And when we don't recognize that and respect that, I think that's when things go awry, because when we expect ourselves to be the same all the time, or we expect, things to just move in this straight path, it's not like that at all. It's this up and down and back and forth. It's this pull and push. And when we are more aware and more in sync with that, I think not only can we honor ourselves better, but we can exist within the world better. And we might understand the tides of society better as well when we understand them within ourselves. So I'm sure you guys have all had this where like you feel like you're, on top of the world and everything's great, but then, things naturally go down again, and sometimes we think that at either of those points that that's who we are and that's how life is and that's how it's always going to be. But inevitably, as we grow older, we know that that's going to come back around again, but we know it's going to go back down again too. Something about this, like, I was diagnosed with depression and bipolar early on, but as I've grown up, I really understand that this is just a part of me being sensitive, like hypersensitive to the push and pull of the world around me and within myself. So I try really hard to acknowledge that and like give myself credit for that. And also to be aware of that when my tide goes back out to sea for a little bit and I feel down, that I'm not where I used to be going, well, this is just life now. And this is who I am. And this is terrible. And it's never going to be any better. I've gone through enough cycles of that in and out flow to know, nope, this is temporary. And I know that sooner or later, the tide will come back in and I will feel full and refreshed again. And that all I need to do is take care of myself now. Like that there's nothing wrong with that. Like if we were the same way we were all the time, A, that'd be boring. B, we wouldn't grow. And like, C, I don't know. I don't think that we would be okay with that kind of existence. I mean, we've talked before about like these polar opposites of like joy and sorrow, you know, like if we didn't have sorrow, we wouldn't be able to experience joy. Like if you didn't have the opposite, you wouldn't be able to even acknowledge the other. So like it's sort of a curse and a blessing that we have to go through these push and pulls, because if everything was one, like, you know, it could have been before and might be after, then we wouldn't have the perspective to get to really enjoy when we have joy. Or I don't know. So I'd like to almost like get better at experiencing my sorrows in that way, to not be like, oh shoot, here I am again, you know, with the tide out, but to be able to say, wow, what a beautiful experience that I get to have this opposite. Also, I do a trick. So I get on this kick a lot about these opposite things because I really think intrinsically that they're connected, like love and fear. You know, I really think that they are part of a larger whole, and we just can't see that. We can't see the whole thing. We can only maybe see like the line that divides them on the other sides of each other. So we can only experience love and hate, you know. But if we were to be better understand how they are part of one vibrational equivalency, then there's a trick that where we can hop from one to the other. So I first learned this technique, this wonderful lady Sierra from this band, 600 Pounds of Sin. I had horrible stage fright, believe it or not, for a very long time. And this has been a wonderful way to work through that. She told me once, so I was getting ready to sing and I was so nervous, I couldn't handle it. And she goes, I have a trick. She goes, excited and nervous feel in your body the same. So I convince my body that what I'm feeling is excitement and not nervousness. She goes, it's a trick of the brain, but my body's going to feel the same way regardless. So if I can just trick my brain into going, oh, this isn't nervousness, this is excitement, then over time and with practice, she'd get really excited. And then she didn't have to try so hard anymore. And it just came naturally. So I get on this kick about a lot of different things, that if we can find the polar opposite to things, can we hop from one to the other? And so I had a moment the other day where I was feeling, you know, I don't know if you guys have this too, but my emotions are not always logical. It's not always like me. I'm also recognizing that sometimes I think I'm feeling feelings of the world at whole, or maybe the houses around me. I'm picking up on that. Because all of a sudden I was just very sad. And so I said, okay, is this a moment to let myself like shed these tears and to feel this sadness? And I said, wait a minute, does this feeling in my body kind of feel like joy? Because joy is really new to me and I'm practicing it, but I've been trying to feel like, what does that feel like in my body, you know? And so laying there, I said, instead of like letting myself give over to this sorrow, let me see if I can switch it. Does this feel like joy? And sure enough, it was very similar enough that I could turn like a sob into a laugh. Because have you ever noticed that when people really cry or they really laugh, it sounds almost exactly the same? Have you ever heard it and you can't tell the difference? Because someone's either having a really great time or a really bad time. And either way, it's emotional and it's wonderful. So I was able to do that successfully, to hop it over, and oh, what a breakthrough to say, if we can just get our brains to follow along what our bodies are already doing, like that we're being pushed and pulled by the world all the time. And if we can get our brains to catch up with these tricks, because here's the thing about it. A lot of what I wanted to talk about too today was about surrender. But I don't know how much I'll go into that, because it's just the idea of like, letting go is surrender, or that flow is surrender. Like if you're swimming, you know, can anybody float real easy on the water? Yeah, like some people can't. Some people are really dense and they just sink, and that's a whole other talk. But for those of us who float, you can't float if you're thrashing and you're trying to swim. Like you have to surrender and let your body lay down in the water to be able to float. If you were trying to actively float, you would sink. So it's this like, when I say force and flow, it's like, yeah, you can try to force yourself to float, but that doesn't sound very relaxing. Or you can just literally let go and let the water like buoyance you up and take you where you're going. I have these, I know that I'm jumping track, but this idea that like life is like a river and it's moving forward regardless of whether we're, we are both the boat and the water. And regardless of whether you're fighting against it or not, we're going, we're moving. I mean, even as a planet, we are, shooting through space as we speak. Nothing's still, nothing's like staying the same. So we can allow ourselves to surrender within that, or we can spend our whole lives trying to like fight and against the current, or as my brother put it once, that I was always trying to like tie rope to shore, go wait, if I can just get some land legs for a second, I'll be better ready to get back on the boat and go with it. He goes, but that's not how it works. Like, you don't get to stop the flow, the movement. You just got to get better at going along with the ride. So I feel like that's a lot of my path, and that's a lot of what led me here, is following this flow that I think that everybody has. I think that everybody has an intrinsic flow, and you know the difference. You know what it feels like when you are going in the direction that life is naturally taking you, and you know what it feels like when you are fighting against it. Oh, good, it segued back all the way around. I love when that happens. That's a brain trick, that like our bodies and our energetic beings know when we're in the flow, we're in alignment, we're going. And our bodies know when we're fighting, because it'll manifest in things like, if we don't listen, it'll manifest in things like dis-ease or, pains or drama in our lives, But it's our brains we have to convince that that's what's happening, because our brains have set up this story about the way things are. I've been reading a lot of Carlos Castaneda, did the Don Juan series, where he studied with this like, this magician in Mexico who like just had these really wonderful things to say about the way of the world and the way of the warrior, like that we're all supposed to follow the path with heart, and that the world presents us with all these things that we think that the world is supposed to be, and that we have this talk in our head all the time, and that the talk is us just reiterating how the world is and how the world is supposed to be. And if we can figure out a way to shut that talk off for a minute, we can understand the world is a much larger mystery than the small box we put it into, so that we can think about it, and that we can think about ourselves and how we fit in that picture. So when we're able to put a pause on that story, the narrative of who we are and what the world is, then we open ourselves up to the infinite possibilities of what we actually might be able to come. Like, now never has to be like it was before, but it all depends on how we think about it. So if you think about yourself as a stagnant thing that's never changing and never growing, and that, oh, I have to be this, and this is who I am in society, and this is who I am to my family, and that's never going to change. Well, then that's forceful. That's you trying to like, build
a concrete shell around yourself.
Yeah, like that's very limiting, and that's very like isolating. And I think that you know that to some degree, like your body reacts to that, and you know that it's not okay. But we're so conditioned that like flow is the weird way. Like the weirdos are the ones following their paths of heart, Like, I'm like, no, let's all be that. What a wonderful world we would live in because all the stories that I've heard too that go along with that are like, a guy went to college and he had his PhD and he was on track. He knew what he was doing with his life and he was making big money and it was great, but he was miserable and he couldn't figure out why. And he went to a specialist who said, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, I don't know. I'll travel the world and be a cartoon artist. Well, cool, go do that. Well, that's not logical. That's not what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, but your heart's telling you that that's your path with flow. Like, why are you forcing yourself on this path just because your brain has told you that that's what you're supposed to do? Because probably somebody told him that that's what success looked like, or blah, blah, blah. So we can go into like the narratives that we build up within ourselves that get us to these points of force, because like nobody comes out of the womb like a forceful being, you're just playing and doing life. And then slowly but surely you learn, oh, this is the way the world is, and this is how I need to be in it, and this is who I am. And then that gets really complicated, because then we go, okay, well, let's not change that. But no, that's a never-ending, evolving thing, as you are never-ending, growing and changing. And, your cells are new like every 7 years. Your tongue is new like every year. Like 7 years is the longest. I think it takes your liver 7 years for every cell to have been replaced. So like every 7 years, you are a new person. you are not the cells you were 7 years ago. So like, doesn't that make you like, doesn't make you 7 years old like all the time? If we could appreciate ourselves in that way, that like we are never who we were and now never has to be like it was before, and stop forcing ourselves to fit in these molds that society has told us that we are in, gosh, what growth we could make and what joy we could experience if like you followed your heart's whim, even though it logically didn't make any sense or nobody agreed with you, or et cetera, et cetera. I picked this topic because in the past I have been told that I am a forceful person, and this left me feeling really poorly. I didn't like it because they said, oh, why do you gotta be so forceful? I said, am I? I didn't realize. I'm trying really hard to go with the flow. What do you mean? I have since realized that every interaction has to do with both people, so it was not just me in that situation, but it definitely made me reevaluate, well, what is force and how am I doing that? And what does that say? And so I've changed it around to be like, well, maybe I'm just a force to be reckoned with and a force of nature, and I come in and I whirlwind, and I'm not always received well because of the things that I talk about and the way that I say them, but I am working on acceptance that that is part of my flow, and that like, you know, if that's a force upon other people, I can just only hope and pray that it is a positive force, even though it may be catastrophically catalytic at the time. All I can do is continuously trust. Everything I talk about is always going to come back to trust, because that was the very first thing that I learned, and the thing that is continuously repeated to me in any intuitional experience I have. Don't get me wrong, I did not really choose this path. It chose me, and I think that's what happens with all of us. It's just kind of like, you can only not listen to your intuition for so long before it says, just sit down and listen, please. We're having this discussion whether you like it or not. And thankfully, I was surrendering and flowing enough to go, okay, and had done all the work already to honor myself and not just go, oh, this is just my imagination, or this is just whatever, or I'm just making this up. To go, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. And time again, it was like, will you please trust that like everything is working out the way it's supposed to be, and everything will present itself in the right time, and that I don't have to keep doing this forceful thing, because in the right flow, you'll be right where you're supposed to be, and like to trust that that's going to happen, so you don't have to keep like clawing. I thought a good thing I wanted to say too is like, I don't know about y'all, but for me, I get really involved in other people, and I try not to, but I can't help it. I think it's just in my nature. So I literally noticed that I was doing this. I wonder if any of you guys have done it either. I would be sitting and I'd try to just be concentrating on myself, you know, and something would be happening across the room, and I would literally see myself going, and then go, wait. Let me just come back and be in my own space, and then something else, and here I go. Like literally leaning into it, being like drawn down this, like to go, how can I help with the drama happening over there? And then having to go, that has nothing to do with me, and there's nothing I can do to help this situation. And doesn't this happen in the world where like, I feel like I get pulled into these things of like, gosh, let me just go to the woods right now and put myself in a tree. Let me do that. And then have to go, that's not where my path of heart is, like, or I would be there already. To trust that like, because I think we always have this idea of like the otherness of like the grass is always greener. Like, oh, I could go to do nursing because it's what my heart tells me to do. But gosh, there's all these other things. There's all these other paths you could possibly take. How does one even choose, you know? Someone asked me the other day, they said, what is your dream? And I said, well, I've got a couple. And they said, yeah, but what are you doing about it now? I said, well, I do this. I said, so I'd like to have a church one day. I said, but I'd also like to make giant dinosaurs out of concrete, and I'd also like to have a farm. And he's like, well, those don't really go together. I said, well, I'm just in the flow right now to see where I end up at the end of it, you know?
They could go together.
It really could. And I have no way to see that now. And that's what I'm learning too a lot from my elders, that like, you have no way to see where it's all going until you get there, you know?
I can totally see a farm
You're right.
that's based around a church where you have concrete
Just dinosaurs?
And I was trying to figure out how to name it.
Yeah, what would we call it? Well, you let me know and you guys can come. So,
We'll visit you.
yeah, please do, you know, and hopefully, and that like, I wouldn't have to understand how I'm going to get the people who are coming there, or how I would make it happen. At least I hope not. Fingers crossed. Like, I'll let you know when I'm old and gray, like if this all worked out for me. But I'm trying really hard to just dedicate myself to this way of being, because trying to concern myself with it all the time and be worried about it and be forceful about like, well, I have to make it happen and it has to happen this way. Is everybody familiar with The Secret generally? The Secret.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a couple. So it's great. Well, we're going to talk about this. It's the idea. It's been called many things over time, but Oprah had a book about. She didn't have a book, but it was in the book club, and so that's how a lot of people find out about it. It's also been called the law of attraction. It's the general idea that like that everybody who's like high and mighty in the world right now, like everybody who's in charge knows the secret and they're utilizing it. And so if we can find out about it too, but pretty much the secret is like three things. It's that like our thoughts create our reality. So if you can think about something other than what you're already like doing and then you can feel it like it's already yours and already like real, and then be grateful for it, then you just like sit back and life brings it to you. And so I've seen this happen in small ways, but I know also people who have made it happen in really large ways, like manifesting houses or partners or vehicles or jobs, that like instead of forcing this way of going, well, I have to figure out how I'm going to get the loan and how I'm going to get the money so I can get the house and find the house and then get the people, to just say, wow, I can picture really clearly what I want, and I can allow myself a moment to feel the feeling. It's a trick, I know, but that's why it's the secret. I can feel the feeling like if I already had it, like we were already there, and we're already standing under my giant dinosaurs talking about these things. And then to just be grateful and let it go. Oh, I'm so grateful that that's upon my path, and I can't wait for it to be my like. And I think the further trick is to trick yourself that that is your current reality. And then one day it just is. So that is really counterintuitive, isn't it? That your brain goes, that's stupid, and that doesn't work, and that doesn't make any sense. But it's this trick to say, but if you can, like, if the vibration of the feeling and the thought can come before the reality, that like the only reason you're continuing in the reality you are is because your brain dialogue is thinking about things in the way that they are, in the way that like that's how they'll always be. And you might think about the future wanting it to be different, but it's in these terms of want and not these terms of trust that it's already going to be that way. So it's a trick. Like if we can put the trust and the faith in this system first, then inevitably it has no choice but to come into your experience, you know? What a wonderful thing. And so, like I said, I'll let you know when I'm older if it worked out. I'm trying, and, you know, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for it, and I wouldn't be in a lot of the opportunities I have now. And I probably wouldn't even be talking about these things if it weren't for, you know, beginning to follow this path. Actually, my mother got me into it initially. I first learned about the law of attraction through this woman, Esther Hicks. She travels around the world, and she's on YouTube as Abraham, and she's a channeler. She like channels spirits, but the insight that she gives out is really on point. So I highly recommend it. And it is all along these lines that are like, wow, if you can if you can think the thought and feel the feeling, the universe has no choice but to like, you know, graciously present you with your heart's biggest desires. And the only reason that we don't have those things is because we don't believe in ourselves enough, or we don't think that we're worthy or deserve it. And we like cut ourselves down before we've made it to the part where we feel it like it's real.
So one of the things that the tools that they use in that thing is like the vision boards or whatever. You create a board with all these things, the pictures of things that you see, how you see your life, what you want it to be. I don't know. That's
and journaling, like any way that like, so like, what are the 3 steps? Because the first step is like to think about it, and the second step is to believe it, like visualize it and believe it, and then the third step is just to receive, just to allow it to let it go and allow it to come to you. So sometimes writing about it, journaling about it, but my friend Sasha, shout out, has done vision boards forever, and she has them all over her walls, and A, they're really pretty, but B, and you know, a vision board is just a collage of things that you would like to see in your life. Literally, you just go through magazines and cut out things, oh, I'd like that, or whatever, and just put it down, you know, it's all right. She can show me, like, factually, well, I made this vision board in this month, and then the next month I got this exact thing. And then she didn't realize it till way later. She looked back and went, oh, shoot, I vision boarded that. There's a nice story about a guy who did vision boards and then, like, moved on with his life, like, packed all the things away. And so here he is, he's moving into a new house, and his son goes, what's in this box? And he pulls him out, and he goes, oh. And the kid goes, hey, that's our house. And sure enough, like 5 years earlier, he had vision boarded the exact house that he ended up in, like to a T, and had forgotten all about it, you know? So it's these ways time and time again where I see not only in my own life, but in other people's lives, that if you trust this process and go with this flow, it really does take you exactly where you were always going to go anyway. I think the main thing is that like you're gonna get where you're going regardless, but do you want it to be like an easy, nice path there, or do you want to like claw and thrash and try to keep your head above water the whole time? Right? Yeah. Do you want to go through the rapids like on your butt, or do you want to like get in the nice raft and cushy just chill out, like have a drink and go down the river and enjoy the view? You know, are you enjoying the scenery, or are you just trying to keep your head above water? So I think the important thing is to say that like you can't do it wrong. Like there's no wrong way to do it. There's just tricks to make it a little bit more enjoyable on the way, I think. And gosh, who wouldn't want those? So that's why I get so passionate about sharing them. I'll end, I think, because it seems like it, with a quote that I really like. Don't take it the wrong way, because I know that words are weird. But I love this quote, and I wish I knew who quoted it. And I might have told you before, but the idea that the psychopath drowns in the same waters that the mystic floats upon. That like we're all in the same water. And it's up to you whether you're going to let that drown you your rest of your life, or if you're going to learn how to float. I think that's a personal choice. That involves us all sharing our tricks along the way. But I think it's not only worth doing, I think it's the thing we're actually supposed to be doing. Because what does that mean other than the fact that like your life is beautiful and valid and perfect the way it is? And if you allow yourself to really trust in what's happening and who you are and where you're going, and not try to force yourself into boxes that you've built around because of whatever, wow, what a more enjoyable experience and existence that can be. And to never forget like how that's going to affect, whether you can see it or not, everyone around you. Like when we stop fighting against the course of life and we go with the flow of it, I do truly believe that has ripple effects outwards in ways that you can't even see in your family and in your community. And then that's, I think, when real change can occur. When we allow ourselves to truly be and trust who we are and enjoy life, I think that's how we're going to change the world. We keep thinking about it like we got to go save the rainforest or go, like, sure, I've thought about driving down to the border and like throwing Molotov cocktails. So, like, that's not going to help anybody. That's not going to like really cause true change. I trust that this is the way we cause true change, is within our own hearts, and trusting that those waters within us really do connect us all. And when we change, and water remembers, and and we don't keep it. That's why we drink more, because it's constantly going through us and going back out into the system and then coming back around again. Gosh, if we can add some joy to that system, I do truly believe that like that's why I have hope in the world in the future, is each one of us going with our flow, as hippie as that may seem, really finding our own joys and really allowing ourselves to fully deserve that and experience it. And then maybe the world will be a less forceful place in general one day. So that's that, I guess. So thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate y'all.